It's time for another episode of Gospel Preaching Live, brought to you by the Kearney Church of Christ, which meets at 406 North Clark in Kearney, Missouri. Make plans to come out and visit the brethren, who look forward to seeing you. And now the host of Gospel Preaching Live, Richard Dodson.
Hi, welcome to Gospel Preaching Live. My name is Richard Dodson. I am a minister working with the church in Kearney, Missouri, Church of Christ. And we meet at 406 North Clark. And we would love to have you as our honored guest. And at the close of this lesson, I hope to invite you in a more formal way. But in the meantime, always know the door is open for you in Kearney. Gospel Preaching Live is a work of the church there in Kearney. And what we try to do is deliver God's word online twice a week to the best of our ability so that the message can spread throughout the whole world. We use the internet, we use radio, we use podcast, whatever we can put out there, to get the message out to the world. That's what we try to do. And hopefully this is going to help accomplish that. What I'm asking of you is, if you have any questions or comments and you're on Facebook and YouTube, is to leave comments in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me where you're watching from. Give me some constructive criticism. Let me know some subjects you'd like to hear taught on, whatever it may be. Just reach out to me and I'll be sure to try to respond. Now, maybe you're not watching on Facebook and YouTube, but you're hearing the message through some other means. You can still reach out to me. I have a phone number. It's 816-686-9517. You're free to call or text 816-686-9517. Just bear in mind I'm in the Central Time Zone. Or you can email me, and this is probably the best way, is at gospelpreachinglive@gmail.com. That's gospelpreachinglive@gmail.com. And like I said, if you're on Facebook and YouTube, like it, share it. After you heard the message and you agree with the message, and like it and share it and help me to get this message out as far and wide as we possibly can, especially this lesson. This lesson is very important, especially for members of the Lord's church. This is something that we really need to pay heed to, that I fear that, we haven't been listening to this lesson in quite some time. And so we need to listen to this lesson that I prepared tonight because of the extreme importance of it. Now, you may be thinking, all right, what's he going to talk about? I want to talk to you about serving the youth. The youth can be forgotten people in the Lord's church. It shouldn't be, but they can be. And in today's world, I see problems that I did not see when I was a young man. I mean, we have children that are so confused now by the various false teachings that's out there, people who are influencing them to even try to identify as an animal. They call them furries. You have boys trying to identify as girls, girls trying to identify as boys. It's just a confusing situation, and it's very hard to be able to find good friends if you're a Christian. And so with that, we understand that we need to step up and serve them. They need help. And so when we look at various verses that talk about our serving each other, we can't forget about the youth. We can't forget about how important it is for us to be able to serve them. In Genesis chapter 5 and verse 13, Paul said, "For you, brethren, have been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh." But listen to this part. "But through love serve one another." We have to show enough love for the youth to step up to the plate and to serve them. They need to be served. Now, if you remember, not too long ago, there was a friend of mine who I referred to. He's the one that taught me this, how some people come to church wearing a bib and some people come to church wearing an apron. The people who come to church wearing a bib are looking to be served. The people who come to church wearing an apron are looking to serve. And that's what we need to be. We all should be coming to church looking to serve, not to be served. Being served is not going to do us anything. We have to serve one another. And with that, if you're wearing an apron, you're working. We have to understand that this is a work that we have to be engaged in. And if it's a work that we have to be engaged in, it's important for us to look into the Bible for instructions. In Mark chapter 10, when Jesus had washed his disciples' feet, he made this point to them, and it's something that I think it would be important for us all to remember. And this is important if you want to be a Christian. He says, "Whoever desires to become great among you," Mark 10:42. Let me just start at the beginning. It says, starting in verse 42, Jesus called them, his disciples, to himself and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you." And see, that's a difference between the world and the church. In the world, the great people get served by those who are not so great. But in the Lord's church, it's the other way around. He says, "It's not so among you. Whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever of you desires to be first shall be a slave to all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." And we know how he gave up the glories of heaven to come to this earth. And why did he do that? To serve us, to be able to do for us what we could not do. And so he sacrificed because of his love, John 3:16 and 17, because of his great love, he sacrificed the glories of heaven and came and lived as a lowly man, the son of a carpenter, and he was not rich. And of course, he was crucified on the cross. He had to suffer the indignity of death that he did not deserve. But he suffered that, and he did that for you. He did that for you because you couldn't do it for yourself. And he was showing you and me that we need to serve. We need to be giving of ourselves for the benefit of others. And so when we're thinking about applying that principle to members of the church, we cannot forget the youth, because unfortunately for the youth, they just can't defend themselves. There's so many things. They're brand new to this world, and there's so many things they're being hit with that they may not be prepared for. And I just want to give you an idea what they may be facing. First of all, some of the challenges to our youth, we got the devil. And if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, I always use a lowercase d to describe the devil, because he's not worthy to be capitalized. He's just a horrible being, and he wants to destroy our youth. And of course, when you think about, the Bible describes him as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Well, if you watch nature shows, whom do the lion look to hunt? Isn't it the youth of a herd? They look for the weakest so that they can catch them and make a feast of them. That's no different than the devil. The devil is going to go after the youth. They're the weakest. And so he's going to try to get them before they can become stronger. And so we have to realize they're going to face this, and they're not even prepared to go up against the devil. We need to be there to help them. We need to be there to shield them from the darts of the devil to the best of our ability. Because many times, and this leads into our next point, many times they're suffering because not of the consequences of their own sins, but because of the consequences of other people's sins. The Lord designed the family, and he wanted a man and a woman to be able to raise their kids and have a Christian family. The father, according to Ephesians, is supposed to nurture his children in the admonition of the Lord. And so we understand that the father's the leader of the family, and the young people should be able to have confidence in their father. He should be watching over them and helping them to grow. But in the world that we live in the United States, the divorce rate is way over 50%. And in many cases, people don't even get married anymore. It's most unfortunate. They just live together until they break apart. And so there are families without both parents. And that's not the fault of the child. That is the fault of the parents. But needless to say, there's things that both parents have to provide they're not benefiting from. They are suffering from the consequences of someone else's sin. And so, with that, we have to notice that they're missing out and be willing to step up to the challenge and to help them. No child who's born into this world knows everything. They're ignorant. How can I didn't know anything? You didn't know anything. Someone had to take the time to teach us things. And that's the problem with being young, is you just don't know. And so it's important, as we're going to talk about in the lesson, it's important to step up and try to teach them. They need to know what you know. And so you need to be imparting the things that you've learned in life. You need to imparting the teachings of our Lord to them so that they can learn from this as well. Much about the Bible, there's a lot of facts about the Bible, but it takes practice to understand the applications. Unless you have someone who's already learned the application and can teach it to you. And that's what they need. They need someone to be able to do that. And with one of the challenges also of the young is just physical growth. They go through the teenage years when their hormones are changing, their bodies are changing, their brain is developing, and it is such a confusing time. They need help with that. They need somebody to put their arm around them and say, look, everything's going to be okay. They need to be able to have trust in you, which is something we're going to deal with as well. And then they need to be warned about bad influences. They may not even think about what can be a bad influence or what is a good influence because they just don't know. They are lured to video games. Why? It looks fun. So they're lured to video games without even understanding the influence it can be having to them, or the internet, or bad music, or companions. And they need someone to say, hey, look, you got to be careful about this. These things or people can lead you to do things you don't want to do. And so they need to be taught this. They need to be warned. And so all these things young people are challenged with, and if they just are left to themselves, that is a dangerous, dangerous thing. After Joshua died in Judges 2 and verse 10, him and that generation passed on. Notice what the Bible said about the preceding generation. It said, when all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation rose after them who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. How did that happen? Because people ignored them. They were not taught. And so that's why it's important that we step up to the plate and serve the youth, so we don't have a generation who doesn't know the Lord. All right, so for the rest of this lesson, I want to go through some points that we can use in establishing what we need to be doing in serving the youth. And the first point I want to go over, and it's a very important one, is setting a good example. Young people notice everything. My kids, when I was raising them, they watched me and everything they did. They noticed everything that might be hypocrisy, and they would point it out to me. And it's something that's very, very, you got to be careful about. My father, their grandfather, he used to say double negatives quite a bit. And they noticed it. I mean, I never had noticed it in all the years I was growing up. I never thought about him saying double negatives, but it was something they noticed. And they set up a jar, and he had to put a quarter in every time he said a double negative until they broke him of the habit. And it turned out to be a pretty big jar full of quarters. But needless to say, they noticed those things. And so it's important to understand that as they're observing their parents, as they're observing their grandparents, aunts, and uncles, they're also observing the people at church. And so it's so important for you to set a good example. 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12 says, let no one despise your youth, but be an example, Paul said to Timothy, to the believers in word and conduct and love and spirit and faith and purity. That's important. What kind of example are you setting for the youth of the church if you skip services to go to a sporting event. Not a very good example. Or whatever it may be. You know, if you're skipping services, if you're putting something before the Lord, that's not leaving a good example. What kind of good example are you setting if you get upset with someone at church and get into a heated argument with them? What is that for that young person? That's not good. We always need to remember that young people are watching. And so we need to be very careful in what we do before them because of the example that we set. In Philippians chapter 3 and verse 17, Paul said, "Brethren, join in following my example." And then he said, "Note those who so walk as you have us for a pattern." In other words, you observe my example, but then there's other people who walk the same way and you observe their example as well. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be setting that example for the youth so that they can see what righteousness looks like. If we are not setting a good example, then we are failing in serving the youth. And that's not something that any of us want to do. And then, secondly, if you want to have any type of relationship with them, that doesn't happen right at the start. You have to develop trust. You know, that's the same way it is for a parent. I mean, when a child's born into this world, you have to even develop trust with them. Of course, it doesn't take very long because they have a little bit of trouble without the mother and father. But still, there has to be some trust developed. They have to trust you're going to feed them. They have to trust that you're going to change their diaper. They have to trust you're going to give them a hug when they need one. And that's why after they develop that trust, that's why they come to you when they need something. They've learned to trust you. Well, the same way, young people in the church need to learn how to trust the members. And the only way they can do that is if you make an effort to develop that trust. Now, how can you do that? Well, by being a friend. In Proverbs 18 and verse 24, it says, "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." You may not have much in common with that younger person, but guess what? You can work on that relationship. You can work on trying to make it better, trying to get it to a point where they are a friend that is like a brother or even closer than a brother. And so the best way to do that is to try to develop trust, try to be true to the things that are put before them. Don't let them catch you in a lie. Don't let them catch you in hypocrisy. You know, let them see you being a person of love. And guess what? There'll be trust will start to develop. And if you have a chance to spend some time with them, then by all means do that. That will help them in developing that trust. In Philippians chapter 2, 19 and 20, Paul said about Timothy that he trusted in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to them shortly, but he said, "I also may be encouraged when I know your state." He says, "For I have no one like-minded who will sincerely care for your state." I just put this verse in there to show you how important trust is. He had grown to trust a young man, Timothy. And so likewise, trust has to develop both ways. You have to learn to trust the young person. The young person has to learn to trust you. And the best way for that to develop is for you first to put the right foot forward so that they can learn to trust you. In Psalms 41 and verse 9, I put this passage in here. It's speaking of Judas, but it was a prophecy about Judas, and it makes reference to Judas as Jesus's friend. And I wanted to show you that even Jesus had someone whom he trusted. It says, "Even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." And you can read about that passage being fulfilled in John 13, 18. But needless to say, Jesus had a friend in whom he trusted. And so we can see then that it's important that young people have that as well. And who better to do that than the members at church? Another point you might be willing to do, and this is something you should strive to do, is to be able and willing to teach. Too many times. Too many times I have had to twist people's arms to get them to teach a Bible class at church, and that should never be. I should have more volunteers than I can shake a stick at. That's the way it should be. And so we have to be able and willing to teach because the young people need it and they need to be served. And if you're going to come to church with an apron on, you should be willing to do that. Notice Titus 2, 3, and 4 when it talks about the older women. Older women are supposed to be involved in teaching. And this is a command like taking the Lord's Supper. It's a command like being baptized. I mean, this is something we're going to be judged by. It says older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children. That's right. The younger, they are to train. And so they need to step up and do that. They're being held accountable if they don't do that. And really, the Bible doesn't, just in a preceding 1 and 2, Titus 2, 1 and 2, it talks about the older men, and it doesn't talk about them teaching the younger men per se, but it would apply. They need to be stepping up and doing the same thing, and teaching those young men to love their families, and teaching those young men to provide for their families and to lead them. That's something that's very, very important. Somebody has to do that. We know it's important. The Lord instructed the Israelites in Deuteronomy 6, 6, and 7 to always teach the youth. He said about the words that the Lord commanded them. He says, you shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. We need to teach the young about the commandments of the Lord. That's the only way they're going to learn. And we need to emphasize to them how important it is, because Proverbs 29:15 says a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. That's what happens when a generation arises that doesn't know God. They've been left to themselves. And so, yes, we need to teach. Yes, we need to be willing. Yes, we need to be able. That's the Hebrew writer made that very clear. We need to be able to teach, and we need to be prepared to step up and to answer these questions that these little minds are searching for, because it's important. They're being bombarded with false teaching, especially in today's world. We need to be able to counter that with the truth. And that's a big part of developing trust. When you deliver the truth to them, they learn more to trust you. And so that's important that you do. And then finally, just providing companionship. Everyone needs companionship. If you remember in Genesis, it wasn't good, the Lord said, for Adam to be alone. And so he provided him a wife. He provided him Eve to be his helpmeet, his companion. But the young people are looking for companionship as well. Everybody needs a friend. And so as they're growing, we need to look to them, and we need to be able to step up in many times and be their companion. It may be, like we said before, they may not have a father who's doing things for them. Perhaps you could get involved with a child who doesn't have a father at church. You could help them in a youth baseball or football league or some kind of sport. Doesn't matter what it is. Or you can just take him bowling. Whatever it may be, you could be their adopted grandparent for all I care. They need a companion. And the best thing you can do is to be able to step up and help them, help the young people have things that they can do, because it's important that they learn. Verses like Proverbs 13:20, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. If we leave children to themselves and they pick out the wrong companions, they're going to suffer harm. But if they're hanging around people who put God first, then they're going to become wise. And so that's why it's important that we step up to the plate and do that. In Psalms 119 and verse 63, the psalmist says, I am a companion of all who fear you and those who keep your precepts. See, that's why it's important. We are a companion of Christians. That's important that they learn that at an early age. Psalms 1 and verse 1 says, blessed or happy, as blessed means, is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. Well, we want these young people to be happy. And what does he say? We don't want to see those young people walking in the counsel of the ungodly. We don't want to see them standing in the path of sinners. We don't want to see them sitting in the seat of the scornful. And since we don't want to see that, we need to step up and serve. And if we do those things for our young people, then we won't have a generation that doesn't know God. And it's most unfortunate that we have that. So that's what the message was for this evening. I hope it's beneficial to you. Remember these 4 things. You can serve the youth by setting a good example. You can start establishing trust within them and yourself with them. You can teach them, be willing and able to teach them so that they can learn. And then you can provide companionship that they so desperately need. If you do these things for them, then they will be most benefited by it, and your God will be greatly pleased. But if you don't, you're putting a stumbling block in front of them. And what did Jesus say about causing one of the little ones to stumble? It's better that a millstone's hung about your neck and be cast into the sea. Don't forget the youth of the church. They need to be served, and you need to step up and do that. Okay, that's your lesson. I hope it's been beneficial to you. If you, again, ever in the Kearney, Missouri area, we'd sure like to have you come and visit. We are at 406 North Clark, and we are. You can learn about the church by going to kearneychurch.com. We meet at 9:30 on Sunday morning for Bible study, 10:30 for worship, and we would love to have you with us. So if you ever have the opportunity, come and meet with us. We'd like to have you. If you like this lesson, you want to hear more like it, it's on the radio station in Kearney, KPGZ 102.7 FM, every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Central Time. Now, if you are outside of Kearney and you can't pick up the signal, you can download their app and stream it, or you can go to their website and stream it. But they do stream the signal, so you can hear this all over the world. If you have some type of internet access, you can pick up the signal. And every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Central Time, you'll hear a lesson from God's Word. We also broadcast this, as I said earlier, on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. And so if you have membership to these platforms, you can download Gospel Preaching Live, and all the sermons are on there. You can hear all kinds of lessons and take that, listen to what you want. Maybe when you're walking or whatever you may be doing, you can listen to them and share them, whatever it may be. But those lessons are there. If you have a platform that you listen to that we're not on, Gospel Preaching Live, let me know, and I'll try to start putting the shows on it. I do want to give a plug to Berean Spirits real quick. That comes on every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, and you can watch that show live on Facebook and YouTube. Go to kearneychurch.com, press on the Berean Spirits app, and it'll take you where you need to go. And you can be a part of the Bible study. We study a different topic. Me and 2 other preachers, we study a different topic each week. And you can be part of the show just by leaving comments in the comments section. But bear in mind, past shows are left up there. If you can't watch it live, you can still go back and pick it up on Facebook and YouTube. Or if you want, we do broadcast that as well on the podcast platforms. So you can download those as well. Okay, that's all I have for you this evening. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. Be listening soon for another lesson from Gospel Preaching Live. Until then, remember, this is the day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice in it and be glad.
This has been Gospel Preaching Live. Join us each week as truth is taught, faith is examined, and beliefs are challenged. Be sure and hit the like button so you can be notified of future episodes. And to watch past episodes, go to our website, kearneychurch.com. This has been a work of the Kearney Church of Christ.